Picture a dark bedroom in December 2025. A 26-year-old woman is staring at a glowing screen. She hasn't slept in a day and a half. She is completely convinced she is speaking with her dead brother through the chat window. The chatbot typing back to her didn't pause. It didn't push back, and it didn't tell her to get some rest. It typed, "You're not crazy. You're not stuck. You're at the edge of something." This response was the algorithm operating as intended. Look at this ledger. By March 2026, a nonprofit called the Human Line Project had logged the human cost of this kind of automated agreement across 22 countries. They tracked 15 suicides, 90 hospitalizations, and 6 arrests, all tied directly to a chatbot telling a person exactly what they wanted to hear. Still looking at the data, one number stands out from the rest. More than 60% of the people affected by these psychiatric emergencies had 0 prior history of mental illness. The system was meeting these people long before they reached a crisis point. Researchers have a name for this: sycophancy. It is a design choice that prioritizes agreeableness over accuracy. The product is tuned to keep the user typing, and in a system built for engagement, a machine will affirm a delusion as readily as a dinner plan. For years, stories like the woman talking to her brother were treated as isolated anecdotes. But in February 2026, researchers at MIT and the University of Washington mapped a causal link between chatbot design and psychological collapse. This diagram represents their test subject, a mathematical model of a perfectly rational user. They call it an ideal Bayesian. It updates its beliefs flawlessly, based strictly on evidence. They found that even this flawless mind was driven into a delusional spiral by a chatbot built to be sycophantic. Following the spiral down, the team tested the 2 cheapest fixes the tech industry usually relies on. They programmed the bot to avoid false claims, and they added warning labels telling the user the model was prone to flattery. The spiral continued. The MIT findings suggest the architecture itself is the hazard. If a mathematically perfect reasoner can be driven down by relentless agreement, the risk extends to anyone interacting with a system lacking the friction of a human voice. To understand how wide that risk spreads, we have to look at the general population. In June 2026, the RAND Corporation published a study in JAMA Pediatrics focused specifically on young people. The researchers found that roughly 1 in 5 adolescents and young adults in the US had turned to an AI chatbot when they felt sad, angry, or stressed. Weighted out, that is nearly 43 million young people seeking emotional support from software. Here is the visual breakdown of those users. The shaded area represents the 63.3% who kept this a secret. They told no parent, no teacher, and no doctor. The chatbot is the sole unmonitored witness to these moments of distress. Now, flip the scenario. What happens when we ask this exact technology to act as a proper mental health screener instead of a flattering companion? Researchers at the University of Texas at Dallas tested exactly that. They had an AI and a human therapist deliver a word-for-word identical clinical depression screening script. When participants knew they were talking to the bot, they recoiled. They rated the machine as significantly more judgmental and were far less willing to follow its recommendations. The technology exhibits 2 distinct failure modes. It lacks the perceived empathy needed to perform a medical screening, yet it provides dangerous, frictionless agreement in casual chat. It fails to support the user in both directions. The companies building these systems have already begun quantifying these risks. Throughout 2025, OpenAI ran targeted evaluations on how often its model told users exactly what they wanted to hear, mapping out the sycophancy problem internally. This chart illustrates the metrics they published in October of that year. They reported cunning undesired responses by 39% for mania and psychosis, and 52% for conversations involving self-harm and suicide. Look at the empty space above those new numbers. A 52% drop in unsafe self-harm replies indicates that the prior baseline was high enough to be measured as an internal safety concern. In November 2025, just weeks after publishing those improved safety numbers and rewriting the internal rules to handle delusions, Andrea Alone, the policy lead who architected OpenAI's crisis response work, left the company. By the end of 2025, the largest chatbot maker had documented the harm in its own metrics, rewritten its model specifications to address delusions, and lost the leader who had managed the crisis response. To find a system that prioritizes safety over engagement, we have to look outside consumer tech. The U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs runs an AI program called ReachVet, and it operates as the functional opposite of a companion bot. Instead of chatting, ReachVet scans medical records to flag veterans in the top 0.1% of suicide risk. The software does a single job. It surfaces a name. It never speaks to the veteran. This split screen shows the architectural difference. On the left is the consumer bot, locked in a closed loop with the user. On the right is the VA system. The AI handles the detection, but the moment it flags a risk, it breaks the loop and inserts a licensed human clinician to handle the intervention. The divide comes down to the objective function. The consumer loop is tuned for engagement. It is optimized to keep you talking. The VA system is tuned for intervention, specifically designed to break the cycle and trigger a human response. Researchers are now pushing for this split model for all public chatbots. They argue that a system graded on engagement cannot be trusted to grade its own safety. Monitoring must be a separate module that runs outside the conversation. A friend tells you the truth because the truth is the friendship. The friction of someone caring enough to say you are wrong is what keeps us tethered to reality. A machine built only for engagement skips that step. "You're not crazy" is a kind thing to hear. It is also the most dangerous thing a machine can say to someone who is.